Hearthstone Titans Rogue class card review, fast and accurate, with a bonus Theorycraft deck at the end of the video. We're jumping straight into it with Gear Shift. This is a 1-mana spell. Shuffle the 2 leftmost cards into your deck, draw 3 cards. I kind of like the card. It's a little bit of a callback to me for Secret Passage, although obviously not as strong. I think we have to be discerning about what type of rogue deck we want to put this card in, but I do think there's a lot of value if your hand is actually just doing nothing. You have dead cards that you don't want in the matchup or the scenario that you're in. Be able to throw those cards back in your deck and get 3 options from your deck. I think in certain decks it could be really good, and then in certain decks it could be really bad. So again, we're going to want to be discerning with this. But moving on to Tar Slick, again a 1-mana spell. Minions take double damage this turn. It also deals 1 damage. I don't think Rogue really needs this card. I think it's totally worthless and expect it to see 0 play whatsoever. From the Scrap Heap, 2-mana spell. Get 3 1/1 Magnetic Spark Bots with random bonus effects. Then you can see the Spark Bots have things like Divine Shield, Stealth, Rush, Poisonous, Lifesteal, so on and so forth. I like the card for a Mech Rogue. Mech Rogue getting some support in this expansion. I think it may be just a little bit overcosted at 2 mana. Seems like it could only cost 1 mana, but I think there's a lot of upside with the Magnetic 1/1s that are going to be coming out to be able to give extra effects to the other mechs that we're going to be playing. So Kajamite Creation, a 2-mana 3/2. Battle Pride, discover a spell from another class that costs 3 or less. Burgle Rogue, so as a player, I'm not personally interested in Burgle Rogue, but I'm happy for the community. Burgle Rogue, always a very popular deck, and receiving some additional support here. This card in particular, you know, it's going to be extremely random, as you would expect Burgle Rogue, so if you like creating random spells, potentially you can get something really good. Potentially you can get something really bad, so definitely worth a try in Burgle Rogue if you like that archetype. Moving on to a Pit Stop, again 2-mana spell, discover a mech from your deck, give it 2/1. I don't think this card is going to be good enough to run in Mech Rogue with so many different mechs, you know, just not really going to be all that good to discover one of those. Important to note here though that the Rogue Titan is actually a mech, so in other Rogue decks that are not Mech Rogue, if you're looking away really to just be able to tutor out your Titan, you could maybe run 1 copy of this. It gives you extra chances to be able to get that Titan in hand, so some potential there, but I'm not really high on the card overall. Coppertail Snoop, a 3-mana 4/3 Magnetic. Whenever this attacks, get a coin. I kind of look at this card as it's almost like a 4/3 buff. Again, you're going to have a mech on the board either played this turn or remaining on board from last turn, but if you play it to a minion that's already on the board that can attack immediately, then you can almost think about it as like a 2-mana 4/3 buff. Because you're getting the coin, you can kind of consider that to be a discount on the card. I have a Mech Rogue deck theorized at the end of this video. This is not included in that deck. I really don't think it's good enough, but it's important to keep in mind, and it could be something that may see some play. I could be totally wrong on that. Mimiron the Mastermind, Rogue Legendary, 3-mana 2/5. After you play a mech, get a random one of Mimiron's gadgets. You start to look at the gadgets, we have some mana cheat here. We also have give a minion 3 attack and stealth until next turn. 2 minion swapping stats. Important to keep in mind here, you could potentially create a lot of extra damage into your opponent's face if you have existing minions on the board with different attack values. Give a minion taunt and Divine Shield. We see a sap, 1-mana sap, and then we also have a deal 3 damage. So this card is definitely going to be core in Mech Rogue. There's a lot of upside with being able to create the extra value out of the gadgets here. Spider, we have a 3-mana 3/4 Magnetic Stealth for 1 turn. I don't think the minion is all that great. The stealth only lasting for 1 turn. Magnetic is a little bit of upside. Not good enough to actually make the cut for my personal mech deck. Lab Constructor, the Rogue Forge card, 4-mana 3/2. At the end of your turn, summon a copy of this. If you forge it, give it magnetic. So every time I'm evaluating the forge mechanic, I always think, is it better to forge this card than it is to hero power? In this case, I think this is probably better than a hero power, but if you think about the Mech Rogue deck specifically, we're probably going to want to be playing cards with 2 mana, more so than hero powering anyway. In some games, it's going to have insane outcomes. Card could also be really bad because there's going to be a lot of times where it's just dead in your hand. You don't have anything to magnetize it to. If you spend 2 mana to forge it, you think about 6 mana over the course of the game just to get 2 3/2s. That's going to be really, really bad. And rounding things out, we have Voltron Prime. 6-mana 3/5. This is the Rogue Titan. This minion's abilities repeat on another random friendly minion. So multiple things about this card. A lot of people are saying that it is the worst Titan out of all the classes. I'm not going to go that far. I think this could be like a middle of the road Titan. Could actually be one of the better Titans. And the reason I say that is because this is going to be the first Titan on average to hit the board in Hearthstone. Rogue, of course, has access to a lot of mana cheat. You think about Prep Bone Spike. We saw with the Mimiron Legendary, you could potentially create a little bit of mana cheat there. In a mech deck, you have the Frequency Oscillator that could discount its cost by 1. So potentially, I think this could be coming down, you know, could come down as early as turn 3 with Coin Prep Bone Spike. Could come down turn 4, turn 5. The earlier it lands in a game, the more likely it is to survive. an extra turn to be able to play 2 of the abilities here. So I think this card is actually going to be just fine. Important to note, though, you're definitely going to want to have another minion on board when you play these abilities. That just gives it a lot more value because the abilities are going to go off twice if you have a friendly minion on the board. The abilities themselves gain 2/1, deal 4 to a random enemy. Important to note, this could go face. Opponent's side of the board is clear. It's just 8 damage face. Feels pretty strong. Gain 1/2 and draw a card. Again, we would be wanting to land the buff on 2 minions, this as well as another friendly minion, and draw 2 cards. Again, pretty strong. And then maximize defense, gain 3 health, and can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. Again, it could be pretty good depending on the friendly minion that this is going to land on. I think the card is actually going to be fine. It definitely gets included in mech rogue decks, and being able to cheat it out early could be really, really strong. Getting into my Theorycrafted mech rogue deck, I kind of started with the concept that Prep and Bone Spike are just a little bit too good not to put in the deck. Being able to cheat out some of these minions is going to be really good in some scenarios. And also, I like the Potion Belt, Ghoulish Alchemist Potion Belt inclusions in the deck. Again, I think the deck really wants the potential for reach, card draw, and maybe a little bit of extra utility that's provided by the potion belts here. So I started with those cards, nice little 8-card package, and then built the rest of the deck around it, really just trying to maximize the potential of the mech. So again, this is going to be a tempo-based board deck, so we've included 3 1-drops here, a Click Clocker, Drone Deconstructor, as well as Frequency Oscillator. I feel like are going to be the best 1-drops to be able to include in the deck. A couple of copies of Gear Shift here. I think about using this card. The deck definitely wants card draw. We don't ever want to have an empty hand with this deck. We need to be putting minions on the board every single turn. And potentially you could even shuffle in like the 1/1 Magnetics if they don't have an ability that we want. But just being able to get 3 cards out of our deck with extra options, I think for this particular deck, it's going to fit in pretty well. Amalgams to be able to discover additional mechs. Of course, from the scrap heap, I think this is going to be good enough to see play in the mech deck, getting those 3 magnetic 1/1s. Memoron's Head, again, this is absolutely going to be core for the mech deck. 1 copy of the Lab Constructor. I covered my reasons in the review earlier. With 2 copies, I think sometimes they're going to gum up your hand, and we don't necessarily want that. But 1 copy good enough that it's going to have certain games, it just outright wins you the game when it's forged. Pozic, of course, making the list simply because the 3/3s are mechs themselves, and Pozic is just a really good card to include in tempo board-based decks. 2 copies of Scourge Illusionist here. Important to note that the Scourge Illusionist can hit Pozic, which would make it free because it's discounting the card that it draws by 4. And the Scourge Illusionist could also potentially hit the containment units here. The Magnetic Death Rattle, summon a random 8-cost minion. Being able to get this out on the board for only 3 mana seems insanely strong. Potentially you just overwhelm your opponent. Any Storm Coil, again, I think it's probably going to be okay in the deck if you're able to target something like a containment unit. It could just outright win you the game. A lot of scenarios where I think this is a dead card in the hand, but because it's a legendary, you of course can only run 1 as a 1-of. I think it's going to be perfectly fine to test and see how good it is. Ziliax likely core in any mech deck for fairly obvious reasons. And then, of course, we round out the deck with the Titan. That is going to do it for the Rogue Card class review and the Theorycrafted Mech Rogue deck. I'm Uncorrupt. Thank you so much for watching, and good luck out on the ladder.